Daniel Sports Central begin for a college football bowl preview and prediction on the 2021 Fiesta Bowl matchup between the Oklahoma State Cowboys and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Pretty significant bowl game here for both these teams. On one side, you got Oklahoma State coming off of a brutal loss to Baylor in the Big 12 title game. Missed out on the college football playoff because of that loss there, but otherwise, still been an outstanding season to say the least for Oklahoma State. And they're facing up against Notre Dame, the first team out of the college football playoff, as Notre Dame sits at number 5 in the college football playoff rankings heading into this matchup. So, should make for a good matchup. We'll be going for a full game preview and prediction on this bowl game here today, starting out with your team trends. Oklahoma State lost to Baylor 16-21 in the Big 12 title game. That was the last game that Oklahoma State played. So obviously, yeah, that's a tough loss. I mean, if you win that game there against Baylor, as they were just inches away at the end of that game. I mean, if you look at the final play of that game, Oklahoma State at the goal line just misses that marker by inches. Oklahoma State was inches away from being in the college football playoff, but I mean, this is still a very significant game here for Oklahoma State. You have a major opportunity to knock off the number 5 team in the nation in this matchup. But yeah, for Oklahoma State, they're 11-2 heading into this matchup, a 1-game losing streak. But for Notre Dame, beat Stanford 45-14 in the last game of the regular season. They're 11-1 heading into this matchup, and as I said before, they're ranked number 5 in the nation. So they were the first one out of that top 4, and Oklahoma State is ranked number 9 heading into this matchup. It'll be on Saturday, January 1st in Glendale, Arizona. Kickoff time is 1 p.m. Eastern. Spread's going Notre Dame here by 1.5 points, so it is a very close spread here, pretty much a coin toss according to the spread right now, which isn't too surprising. I mean, both teams are very evenly matched, I would say, in this matchup. Statistically, both teams are very similar as well. Oklahoma State has played a tougher schedule, but not by a whole lot. Over under 45.5, and your FPI is going Notre Dame here at 51.8%. So even the FPI is going just barely towards the Irish. It's also the first matchup in the history of these two football programs. Here's a stat comparison for this game. Oklahoma State, 30 points per game, 16 points allowed, 221 passers a game, 181 rush yards, and then for yards allowed, you got 184 passing, 89 for rushing. So the Cowboys here offensively, they've been a good football team all season long. Spencer Sanders has had a good year, 2,400 yards. 16 touchdowns, 12 picks. But their top running back has been a major impact player, and that would be Jaylen Warren. He's got over 1,100 yards on rushing for the season and 11 touchdowns. He's been major impact player. And I mean, for Notre Dame, they've got a key running back as well, Kyron Williams, over 1,000 yards of rushing, 14 touchdowns. He's had a great year, and he's been a very talented football player. And I mean, he's been a huge impact player on this Notre Dame offense for a few years. And Jack Cohn, of course, the quarterback for Notre Dame, you got 2,600 yards on him, 20 touchdowns, 6 picks as well. His stats have been pretty good this season as well. Jack Cohn, of course, the Wisconsin transfer, he's had a great season for the Irish, and he's had a big impact on this football team, certainly. But looking at the defensive side of the ball here, Oklahoma State does have the edge. Statistically, they are the better team defensively, but Notre Dame isn't too far behind. Their pass defense, I mean, both sides, I mean, passing and rushing, they have allowed a lot more yards than Oklahoma State, but, I mean, Notre Dame's defense still is extremely talented as well. But, yeah, statistically, as I said, though, before, I mean, Notre Dame offensively is slightly better, but on the defensive side of the ball, Oklahoma State does have the edge there. Some recent matchups, Oklahoma State lost to Baylor 16-21, beat Oklahoma, though, 37-33. That was an insane matchup. I mean, that was a huge addition to that rivalry between Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, but Cowboys got the win there. They knocked off the Sooners 37-33. That was a huge win. Set them up in the Big 12 title game. Beat Texas Tech 23-0. Beat TCU 63-17, and beat West Virginia 24-3. So Oklahoma State, they were on fire down the stretch. I mean, November especially was an outstanding month. I mean, for Oklahoma State, they blew out 3 teams and beat Oklahoma. And obviously that Baylor loss was just a tough one there to finish out the season, going up into the bowl game. But once again, still been a great year for Oklahoma State. Not many people expected them to be as good of a team as they were over the course of this season. But for Notre Dame, they also found their stride down the stretch. I mean, if you look at this football team, they beat North Carolina 44-34, beat Navy 34-6, beat Virginia 28-3, shutout Georgia Tech 55-0, and also beat Stanford 45-14. So they haven't played any ranked football teams in a while. It's been a long time. The last ranked team that they played was back when they played Cincinnati on October 2nd. They ended up losing that game, and that's the reason why Notre Dame isn't in the college football playoff right now. It's because of that Cincinnati loss. But they beat Wisconsin 41-13. That was a huge win. Obviously, though, the Badgers were kind of in their slump of the season there at the beginning or in September. So that was still a good win though. Wisconsin's talented. They also beat Purdue. Purdue turns out to be a good football team as well. So, but Notre Dame, they haven't really played. They haven't played a ranked team once again since early October. So it's been a while, and Oklahoma State does have the edge there in strength of schedule. Here's some key points for this one. Oklahoma State, of course, 11-2. They've got a balanced offense and a strong defense. They've got a good rushing game. They've got a good passing game as well. Oklahoma State, though, offensively, their defense has been more consistent, I would say, over the course of the season. Especially like down the stretch. They shut out Texas Tech. They played very well against West Virginia. Only allowed TCU to score 17. But their offense as well has had some very impressive performances, especially against OU, scoring 37 on them. Been a dominant Big 12 team all season long, and quality wins include Kansas State. That was a big win. Baylor, TCU, and Oklahoma. They did beat Baylor back in the regular season, but obviously they did lose in the Big 12 title game. But obviously TCU, Oklahoma, Kansas State also big quality wins. As for Notre Dame, they've been consistent down the stretch. Kyron Williams and Jack Cohn, both key players. Definitely big offensive players to watch out for in this matchup. They'll be tough to stop. And then for Notre Dame, of course, your quality wins aren't quite as good as Oklahoma State's, but you've beaten Purdue and Wisconsin, two good Big Ten opponents. And USC, you could consider that to be a decent win, even though USC hasn't been very good. And North Carolina, of course, at 6-6, they've kind of been underwhelming as well. But North Carolina is a very talented football team, so that was a good win in the end there. But that being said, let's get to the prediction here for your Fiesta Bowl, Oklahoma State and Notre Dame. I'm going to go with the Irish here. 27-24 is my predicted final score. This is a tough one to predict here because you got a lot of factors at play. And one of them that I haven't mentioned yet is that Notre Dame, their head coach, of course, Brian Kelly, over the course of the entire season, is now gone. He is at LSU. He took off, and he is no longer with this football team. And that's going to be significant in this game, I think. Both teams are very evenly matched. It's pretty much a coin toss. Both teams are extremely similar in a lot of ways, and talent-wise, both teams are very capable of winning this game. But I feel like Notre Dame's going to come into this game. They're going to have an edge, and they're going to have a chip on their shoulder based off of Brian Kelly and him taking off and leaving this football team behind. Oklahoma State as well, if you take into consideration what the emotions could be for Oklahoma State here, both teams are going to be motivated, I think, certainly. But Notre Dame, they may be a bit more motivated because of the situation with their coach. But Oklahoma State on the flip side, coming off a brutal loss to Baylor, they could be in the college football playoff right now. It's going to be interesting to see how Oklahoma State responds to that as well. How are the Cowboys going to come out after blowing, it was a very close game. They played excellent that entire Baylor football game, and it could have obviously been a win, but they were inches away and still took the loss. But for Oklahoma State here, how is this team going to come into this matchup? Are they going to come out flat, or are they going to be ready to go and ready to put up a fight against a very good football team? In the end, I think Notre Dame gets this win, but it's going to be very close. 27-24 is the predicted final score. I'm going to say 55% towards Notre Dame. Your over-under is 45.5. I'm going to take the over for this game as well, and Notre Dame to cover the spread. But once again, this game could go either way. This is a tough one to predict. Statistically, Oklahoma State is slightly better. They have played tougher opponents down the stretch, but if you look at Notre Dame, they have really found their stride here over the past 4 games, and their November was excellent. They didn't really play a very strong opponent in November, but they did what they had to do. They blew out all 4 opponents that they played in November, and for Oklahoma State, they beat Oklahoma and they beat Texas Tech and beat TCU by big margins. Well, Oklahoma, that was a close game, but that was just a huge win. But Oklahoma State, they're a good football team. I think they keep it close, but in the end, Notre Dame, they get the win by a score 27-24. Let me know your thoughts and comments below on this game, and I appreciate you guys all watching. As always, stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you later.